Today's video has been in the works for quite some time, and yep, it's another network install. Now obviously this isn't my own house, this is my friend's house, but yep, probably about a year ago, something like that, my friend bought a new build house. And since he did that, I kept saying, right, I'll come and install a network, never got around to it, so finally doing it now. And yep, I'm kind of on tour as well, because this is over 200 miles away from home, so yep, I've literally travelled all this distance to install a network. But I'm really looking forward to it, because it's going to be quite a fun project where we're actually going to be running quite a lot of cables through the building and doing a full-on install. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a very long video, but what I want to do with this is go into a lot of detail showing all the hardware we're using, how we're running all the cables, talking about all the logic behind why we're doing certain things and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a very long video, but I'm going to go into a lot of detail and really try and show sort of my methodology for wiring a sort of new build house. Also, if you hear any background noise in this video, it's because I'm currently dog sitting this adorable boy as well, so yeah. Yep, very flattering, big yawn. But yeah, so he might make an appearance throughout the video as well, or causing absolute chaos when he inevitably gets into something and eats a tool or something. So yes, it's going to be interesting trying to do construction work around someone who's going to try and eat everything that I lay down, but yeah, he's a very good boy. So of course I have to show the dog if there's a dog in the vicinity when I'm filming. But yeah, so as you can see, there's already sort of what looks like a sort of network installed, but realistically this is all temporary. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at what's already in place, which is really just what came with the house, and then we'll talk about what we're going to be doing. So here we have the cupboard under the stairs, and this is basically the same sort of setup you'd see in almost every new build house in the UK. And that's where you have a fibre ONT, this case from OpenReach, and the only cable coming into the property is a piece of fibre and it's GPON fibre network. So that comes into this ONT here, and this provides gigabit fibre. Of course you can have really any speed over that you want. Not everyone will pay for gigabit, but the connection here is actually gigabit, hence why we want decent wire cabling. And then what the builders provide is really just a couple of runs. And for this house has more than I've seen in others, where basically you've got a Cat5 run to the upstairs bedroom, a Cat5 run to the living room, and a phone extension that also goes to the living room. And the idea behind this really isn't to really like have kit in the cupboard and link it to all the rooms. It's really so what you would do is you'd plug your like ONT into one of these ports to say run the connection from the ONT to the living room, and you just put your ISP's provided router in the living room quite often, or you maybe put the router in the cupboard but you've only got the two runs. And then for the phone point, the way this works is they no longer deliver copper phone lines to the property. And interestingly, this ONT doesn't even have a phone point on it. The older ones did, but this one doesn't. So I think the way the phone service works is you'll use your ISP provided router, and it'll have a phone point on it, and it'll do VoIP, and you'll run a cable from that router into this point here, and that'll connect up your phone extensions. However, obviously this isn't really enough for what we're trying to do here in a sort of modern house, because there's a run to the living room, but it goes to behind the couch in a really inconvenient place. And there's a run to the upstairs bedroom, but it's the master bedroom where you're not going to want like an office. So these aren't really actually that useful. So the plan is to install a lot more cabling into this cupboard, as well as using the existing stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to run 5 more Cat6 runs to upstairs. That'll give us 2 ports in the office, 2 ports in the spare bedroom, and we'll just keep the existing port in the master bedroom because that's fine. And we'll also have one for the upstairs access point. We're also then going to install 4 more ports just to the right of the cupboard here where we have the TV, because currently there's nothing for the TV set up here. So we're going to put 4 ports in here just to allow all the TV stuff to be connected, so that'll also connect up and run into the cupboard. And then for the existing cables, we may as well reuse them because we may as well use these because there's no point taking them out or anything. But we'll replace all the jacks with new ones. And what I think I'll probably do is try and take the cables out of this and bring them up into the same trunking we'll be installing later that you'll see in a minute, and bring it all into the rack for a patch panel. So we will use these existing runs just to, we may as well keep them in place, but they're not hugely useful. Additionally, I mentioned there's this phone line. We don't need that. No one's going to want an analog phone extension really. But this is just wiring Cat5e along with everything else. So what I'll do is I'll replace the module on both ends with an RJ45 module. So this just acts as an extra network run to the living room. So both these ports will go to the same media panel in the living room that we'll show in a minute, and that will just give us the 2 network ports on that. So that's fine. So yeah, that's really what's already installed. So what we'll now do is we'll take a look at the media panel and then upstairs, and then we'll come back and take a look at what we're going to install and how we're going to install the additional cabling. So now here we are at the other side of the living room behind the couch, and here's the media panel. And these are very common in all sorts of new build houses in the UK. And they always put them in the place that you don't actually want your TV to be, so this is actually like basically useless. But what you have here, if you have an aerial connection that goes up to the attic, there's no aerial provided, but they just run the coax for you. There's an RJ45 connection, so that's the other end of that, run to the hall cupboard that is labelled with an L. And then we have the phone extension here, which the module's missing, I think. Yeah, that needs fixed. But as you can see here, that's just Cat5e. So what we'll do is we'll basically replace both of these with new RJ45 modules and have a pair of network points here, just because we can really. So here we are in the upstairs bedroom. And as I mentioned, there's just a single network port. So this is the master bedroom halfway up a wall. It's not very useful at all. I think it's so you could have maybe a TV on a stand here, but it's right next to the door, so why would you want that? I don't know. But we've got an RJ45 network port here and another aerial connection. So as I mentioned before, we're just going to keep this. I'll replace the module with a new one because we're using quite nice modules. And I'll replace this Euro module faceplate because it's cracked. But yeah, we're just going to keep this port here just because it may as well be used at some point. But yeah, we'll replace the module and the faceplate as well. So that was a look at what the house came with. But if you're fairly observant, or not remotely observant, it's fairly obvious, there is already some sort of stuff here that's already been put in. But this is all a very temporary setup. So we have this cabinet here. We got this cabinet literally for this project, but it's just obviously my friend just put some kit in it now just to use it because obviously he had the cabinet sitting around. But we'll be taking all this out and installing all the structured cabling into a patch panel in this cabinet. Now you'll also notice there's already a couple of holes with some cables running through it. Now these are just very much temporary runs. They're just patch leads with an RJ45 on each end. And there's two that go through the wall there and come out there to serve the TV. And then there's I think 3 more here that go up through to upstairs just to serve some stuff in the office, just to provide a temporary connection. But basically what this shows is my friend's already gone and figured out the cable route. And it's actually going to be quite good. So we'll take a look at what we have downstairs first. Now, for the TV, it's dead easy. There's just a big void under the stairs here, so that wall is just a big empty void that comes out here. So that'll be dead easy just to put whatever sort of port we want, wherever we want it here, and run the cables directly through that void and pop them out into the cupboard. And for upstairs, it isn't too bad either. This is obviously the underside of the stairs, and in the side here, basically you've got that wood is the side of the stairs, but there's this big gap here, and it's quite a deep gap, like, that is a deep gap there. And that runs through here all the way up to basically upstairs. Now there's a big bit of timber roughly in line with the top of this door frame, and also there'll be another bit of timber in line with the ceiling, so we'll have to cut the wall out and try and drill through holes and repatch it all. But what we can do is we can run all the cables from at least from under the floor upstairs, down through the wall here, down through the side of the stairs, and bring them out on this face here. And the plan is to actually install flexible conduit. So what I'm going to do is run flexible conduit from here, through this wall, through to under the floor upstairs. We'll go upstairs in a second and take a look at what we have up there, but we'll then bring it up from under the floor upstairs, through an upstairs wall and then through a cupboard, and get all the cables up to the attic. And then once we're in the attic, it's dead easy just to drop down into all the rooms. And by installing flexible conduit, it means that we can very easily pull new cables in and replace them over time. If they want coax brought in, they can do that. If they want fibre, they can do that. They just want to replace the Cat6, it can be done. It'll be really, really cool to have flexible conduit installed. And it's something I've not done before, so I'm really looking forward to trying that out. So yeah, we'll have that flexible conduit will come from upstairs, through this wall, we'll patch all these holes up, and it'll pop out on this face of the wall under the stairs. What I'm then going to do is install a big bit of dado trunking that's going to come along here. The flexible conduit will come out inside the trunking. The trunking will then run along towards the back of the cupboard. And then at the back of the cupboard, we're going to hopefully bring these ports up and pull them out into the trunking as well, if possible. But it'll come all onto the back here, with a big bit of trunking that takes all the cables to the back of the cupboard. What I'll also do is I'll install a bit of vertical trunking on this wall here, that comes up the wall and meets that trunking that's going along the top. In the vertical piece of trunking, I'll then bring out the cables that are going through this cavity and feeding the TV. And what I'll then do is on that piece of trunking that's vertical, I'm going to install a brush plate that we can bring all the cables out of and into the cabinet. And that should be a really neat setup. And the plan will be to allow loads of slack on that cable, create a big loop behind the cabinet, so the cabinet can be easily pulled out to get in behind it, because obviously we are kind of pushing the cabinet up against this equipment, so if it did ever need to be serviced, we need to be able to get the cabinet out. So yeah, that's the plan here. So yeah, looks pretty easy. So the plan is just, to run the cables in conduit, down that wall, along to the back and trunking, and then down the side wall there, hopefully. Now obviously this is very much dependent on whether it actually pans out that way and the roots work, but I'm hopeful that's a decent solution. So what we'll now quickly do is we'll pop upstairs and take a look at what we've got upstairs, basically what is immediately above here. And we'll talk about how we're going to then run the cables from under the floor upstairs to up into the attic. And then what we'll do is we'll take a look at the hardware we're installing. So here we are upstairs, and this is directly above that wall downstairs, so the cupboard's directly down here. And those cables that you saw earlier that were going up through that wall, they're just popping out through the floor here, just a very simple temporary install. So the plan is to cut a hole in the floor here using that solid board access cutter I've used before. Someone's investigating. And that'll give us access to under the floor to help us get the conduit in. What I then hope to be able to do is there's this bit of wall here. What I'm hoping to do is cut the bottom of this wall out, obviously we'll patch it, and then we can run the conduits through under the floor up into this wall and bring them up. And because this is within 150mm of the corner of the room, this is a safe wiring zone to run the cables in, even though there's a light switch there already, so that already makes it a wiring zone, but we can run the cabling through that. And then I think rather than taking the conduit all the way up to the attic, that would just make it a bit tricky to rod cables and stuff. We've got a cupboard here, so if we go into this cupboard, what we'll find is, obviously we've got the wall in the cupboard here. This is obviously the other side of that corner of the wall. What I'm probably going to do at some point on this wall here, I'm going to bring the cables and the conduit out the wall and then have a bit of surface trunking that comes up through this cupboard and runs up and basically through up into the attic up there. That means it's easier to rod cables through the trunking because you can kind of stand on the ground in the cupboard and feed rods down here rather than trying to do it in the attic. And additionally, this is quite a nice big upstairs cupboard, so it could be useful. You might, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if you ever wanted to have equipment in this cupboard. So having the ends of the conduits here is quite good because you could easily run additional runs into the cupboard itself rather than taking them all up into the attic. So yeah, that's basically the plan. It is bring the conduits, run to the floor, up through that wall, pop them out inside this cupboard, and then run trunking the rest of the way up to the attic. So yeah, that's the plan. But realistically, until we actually install the cables and try it, I can't say for sure whether that's going to work. So that'll be the next thing to sort of try and figure out. But yeah, that's the plan. Let's go and look at what hardware we'll be installing. So now that's the sort of plan out of the way, let's go through all the stuff we'll be installing. So obviously the first thing we have is a big cabinet. And to be honest, I don't actually know what this is. We literally got this free. It's from the company the company I work for obviously has an office, and the company in the office next door had moved out. And I think there was like contractors in cleaning the office out or painting it or redecorating it or whatever. And they'd found this had just been left behind, brand new in box. So I think they spoke to someone from our company and said, oh, do you want it? So they came to me and said, do you want it? And I was like, well, my friend can rehome it. So we literally got this cabinet basically free. It had just been like left in a sort of vacated office. So it's a very nice little cabinet. It's hugely deep. I don't know how many U that is, maybe. I could count it, but pretty big. Someone's trying to sniff it. I think it's 550 deep. So it's a big, deep cabinet, which is huge. And we definitely wouldn't be able to wall mount it at this size. But it works pretty well because in this cupboard it can sit right in the back and it's really solid, so even though it is big, we can very easily pile stuff on top of it and basically you can store stuff on top of it really easily. So yeah, that's a cabinet there. And then up the top we've got the cables and stuff we've bought. So here we have the cable. This is a 305 metre of Cat6 cable. So this is all solid core, low smoke, zero halogen Cat6 cable. And obviously when you're buying Cat6 cable, always make sure you get it from a reputable place because a lot of Cat6 is copper clad aluminium. You really need it to be solid copper, so this is obviously solid copper. Most of the stuff we bought here was from a place in the UK called Comtech Direct, and I think Ultima's maybe their own brand, or I mean you can buy it from other places as well, but I think it's the Comtech company has the Ultima brand and you can buy it from them or other places. But it was a decent price and it seems pretty decent cable, so 305 metres, way more than we need, but I wasn't sure if 100 metres would be quite enough, especially for a bit allowing for future expansion, and it was cheap enough that buying the big box made sense. And the next thing we have is some Flexicon. So this again was from Comtech. I'll put all links in the description. And I've gone and bought some 25mm flexible conduit. So we'll run 2 of these upstairs and that will let us run the cables in it. That's much more capacity than we need. I think realistically we could do everything we need in one of them, but having the extra capacity makes sense. And I think I kind of didn't estimate how big 25 metres of flexible conduit is. So yeah, we've got a lot more than we need, but yeah, there's the flexible conduit there. So now here we have more of the hardware we're installing. And this is all around the faceplates and patch panel and stuff like that. So for the Euromodule faceplates, I've done my usual rule that I try and do and match the existing accessories that are here. So all the existing electrical accessories, sockets, switches, all that sort of stuff are from the Dita Slimline product line, which is basically the standard product line you're going to see in every UK new build house. They're just a relatively cheap, okay quality product. So I've gone with these, and that just means that if they're next to existing sockets, they're the same shade of white, the same sort of side profile, same thickness, and it just kind of matches and looks good. The reason I do it is I feel it makes it look less like an addition. The network doesn't look like it's been added after the fact. If it all matches, it looks original, which is what I try and do. So I've gone with these. However, I haven't gone for the Dita Euro modules. They're just a bit rubbish. They don't have like a proper label window, and they just don't look very good. So I've gone with much nicer Euro modules. And that's these here, which are again from the Ultima brand from Contact Direct. Now, if you've seen the video of my flat, you'll have seen that I really like using angled Euro modules, where the network jack's sort of recessed at an angle, so the cable comes out and points down the wall, rather than protruding straight out into the room. Now in my flat I used ones from XL, where you buy a keystone shutter, so you have a shutter at the front that's got the angled slot in the little slidey bit, and then you have a keystone module that you put on the cable and click it into the shutter. And it works well, but it does mean that you have quite a deep assembly, so it has to go into quite a deep back box. So when I saw these, I bought them because I just wanted to try them out and see if they're a decent alternative to the XL ones. Because unlike the XL ones, which, yeah, need a keystone module, this is just an all-in-one product. So you basically have IDC terminals on the back, there's a little cap over it that's covering it, but I can't really get that off, but I'll show terminating one of these later. But you can just punch the wire straight down onto this without needing that separate keystone jack. And then it's got this nice little cover that goes on to hold the cables in, that clips in really securely. Space for a zip tie to secure the cables in, and it gives you a nice little angled jack at the front. And it's got a proper labelling window as well, so we can label these up. So that's what I've gone for there. And these do seem pretty nice. They're maybe not as nicely built as the XL ones I used, but being an all-in-one single part that's nice and shallow, or relatively shallow compared to the XL one, these do seem like quite a decent option. Next up we've got this, which is just a sort of inline cable joiner. It comes in a million different parts, and this is also rated up to Cat 6A, but they do actually state this is backwards compatible with Cat 6 and Cat 5. And it just seems like a really nice way of joining two cables in line, so we'll try this out as well, because I probably want to join those cables there through. So if I end up doing that, I'll be using these. These just seem like quite a nice solution, because compared to ones I've used before, these seem quite nice and thin. They're not like a big chunky box, so we'll try these out if we have a use for them. And then we have the patch panel. So as I did in my own flat, I've gone for a keystone patch panel. I'm not going for the dual stacked one like I have, but I've gone for one that I can replace the keystone jacks in. And I think this is the way I'm sort of going to go going forward if I've got the budget to get a better patch panel. Because what you do with this is you put the keystone jacks on the cable and then you can clip them in, rather than having to punch them down directly onto the patch panel. This is quite nice because it means, first of all, that you can actually mix and match the modules. So even though everything here is just going to be a regular RJ45 module, there's nothing stopping you putting, say, coax to this, phone lines, HDMI, that could all come to these ports, which is quite nice. You can also do things like, say, the modem, for example, or the ONT, sorry. If I want the uplink from that to come to the patch panel, I could put that all the way over to the right-hand side and have all the structured cabling to all the rooms on the left-hand side. You can kind of, without having that, and then you can blank off the ports that aren't used, so it's not unintuitive, so it's intuitive as to what ports are available. So I quite like it. But the main reason, well, I wanted to use it anyway, but there's a particular reason why this will be very useful here, and that is obviously because this cabinet is quite big and in the way. If for some reason this did ever have to come out, for example, that needed serviced, or potentially even somebody needed to get into the consumer unit and needed more space in the cupboard, it may be a case that the cabinet needs to come out. Now obviously if all the cables were terminated into a normal patch panel, there's no way that patch panel is going to fit out that hole in the top of the cabinet. So with a keystone patch panel, what you could do is you could take the patch panel out, unclip all the modules from the back of it, and then what you end up now with is a cable with all these little keystone modules on the end. So that could easily be pulled out the top of the cabinet could be totally pulled out the way, whatever work needed done in the cupboard can be done, the keystone modules can then be pushed back into the cabinet and clipped back into the patch panel. So it makes it much easier to get the whole cabinet out of the way without having to actually re-terminate any connections. So that's the other reason for going for a keystone patch panel. And yeah, it seems pretty decent quality. My only complaint is it's got these little labelling areas, but they're just literally a bit you could write on, and I don't like writing on things in Sharpie. Some nicer patch panels have a bit you can actually put a bit of paper in behind a window, but this will be fine. We just need the numbers here, so that'll do. And it's also got nice tie points at the back, so we can easily tie the wires on so they don't get tugged out, so pretty good as well. Obviously we need keystone modules for this, so I've just gone with, may as well match the brand, so I've just gone with Ultima ones. It's just, they look very basic. I'll show them on, you know, how I actually use them all. They seem absolutely fine. They're just standard toolless keystone modules. I like the toolless ones because they're very easy to terminate. Basically push the wires in, clip them, line them up, cut the excess off, clip them together, and then that works. So we're putting these onto all the wires in the cupboard and clicking them into the patch panel. So obviously for all the things here, there's a lot more of them in a big box. Obviously I've got sort of a bunch of blanks just to blank off the ones in this keystone patch panel we're not using. And as for other things, we've got some Flexicon grommets, so that'll be going, we'll be using them in a second, I'll show you where we're going to use them. And we've got this cable sleeve. So this is a sort of big cable braid, so it's just this sort of, you know, like one of those sort of finger trap things that you can kind of like push in and it expands out, like it expands massively. It's quite hard to show when I'm holding the camera in one hand because I've not got a tripod with me, but yeah, it expands massively. So this is what we'll be using in this cupboard. The cable will come out the trunking, out the trunking, it'll run through this big braid in a big loop behind the cabinet and then come into the cabinet. And it just means all the cables will be nicely inside this braid, so they won't be a big bundle of cables all getting tangled and look horrible. It'll be one nice big thick braid coming out the wall, which I think will look really, really nice. And then finally over here we've got some pattress boxes, so just standard Appleby dry lining boxes, just standard you'd use. I've gone for 7mm because realistically, unless you're working in a shallower wall, I always just pay the extra few pence and buy the deeper box just because it's nicer, so deeper box there. And then we've got this Click Flame Guard box. Now, this is a fireproof dry lining box. You may have seen me use these when I did my smart LCD control panel stuff, where I used one of these. But I'm not using this for any sort of fire resistant property. The reason I'm using this is because it's a dry lining box that has 25mm knockouts. So my plan for this is in the upstairs cupboard, where we need to bring the flexible conduit up the cupboard, bring the cables out of the wall and then up in trunking. I'm going to put this in the wall, terminate the flexible conduit into the bottom of this using these glands. So in the wall you'll have that, and you'll have the flexible conduit coming out inside this box. That'll then be in the wall, and I'll then install the trunking over it with a big hole cut out the back of the trunking. So in the back of the trunking you'll have that hole in the wall where the cables then come out, and it'll snake up and into the trunking. It'll make more sense when I show it in person, assuming it actually works. But that's basically why I use these. I've not used them for any sort of fire rating or anything like that. I've just used them because they're dry lining boxes that allow for 25mm grommets to go in. But speaking of fire rating, there's one fire rating thing I'm going to do, and that is this high expansion intumescent sealant. Now, this would be interesting to see what people's thoughts are, because I don't know if it's required, but I may as well over-engineer the solution rather than under-engineer it. And that is basically this cupboard here. So this is obviously under the stairs. And even though it doesn't seem to be part of the building regulations, the NHBC regulation, or sort of NHBC sort of requirements or quality checklist or whatever, which is a sort of requirement that new houses have to sort of adhere to get the NHBC warranty, they state that the underside of the stairs should be, I think, 30-minute fire rated, which isn't much. And I don't think this is actually fire rated plasterboard at all. But I think it basically just means this has to have, like, you know, I think even one layer of plasterboard does count as a 30-minute fire barrier, I think. So if I'm going to be drilling into here, I don't want to harm the fire integrity of this. Obviously there's these holes already that I didn't put in, but we'll get these all patched up. But if I'm bringing the cables out, I probably don't want to really just have big holes, because straight behind this plasterboard is wood, and that wood's the stairs. And what you don't want is, you know, something to catch fire, you know, all this electrical stuff, consumer unit, all that sort of stuff, and the fire to get through into the wooden stairs, and then that's pretty bad. So I bought this, which is just intumescent sealant, but this is high expansion stuff. So this is rated for going round pipes. You can see there for fire stopping cables, plastic pipes. So the idea is that you can put this around a plastic pipe, and it's high expansion, so that if there is a fire, this will expand so much that it'll actually crush the pipe in as it melts and seal the hole up. So that's my plan with this, is to use this so where the flexible conduit comes through the plasterboard into the trunking, I'll be using this to seal around it, just so that it maintains that fire barrier. I don't know if this is required. I imagine probably if this was done from new, they probably wouldn't put this in. But for the sake of a few pounds to buy something like this, I thought I may as well just, you know, go belt and braces and put in the proper fire sealant. So yeah, that's that there, and it's high expansion, so it's not just normal intumescent sealant. This will actually expand, so it's designed for use around like a pipe. So you can put it around the pipe and it'll expand and crush the pipe. So yeah, that's what that's for. So yeah, that's all those sorts of accessories and back boxes and patch panels and stuff like that. And now for the final hardware we've got all the trunking. There's probably little bits of extra hardware that I've forgotten about, but I'll show that as we're going on, really. This is all the sort of key stuff. So we've got this trunking here, and this is going to be used in the downstairs cupboard as well as in the upstairs cupboard. And rather than just going for sort of basic mini trunking, or is it MIDI trunking or whatever, or maxi trunking, just the cheap sort of generic trunking, I've gone with this Schneider Electric dado trunking. So it's not like 3 compartment or anything, it's just like a single compartment. But it just seems a lot more solid. So you've got the side pieces and you've got this piece that's obviously got protective film over it that goes in the front. And this is really solid trunking. This is, you know, built like a tank. It's also 3 meters long, hence why it's a bit hard to get in shot and a bit worried about it falling over. But yeah, this is I think 100 mil by 50 mil. So it's really large trunking. It's maybe a bit overkill, but it just seems really good quality. I've then obviously got some end caps, so that's just going to go on the end to cap it off. But the reason I went for this stuff is because obviously this is designed for, you know, running along the wall of an office and having your sockets and stuff in it. So what we can do is we can get this little mounting frame that will clip into the trunking. So you basically cut the cover and basically remove part of the cover and clip this in instead. And that's a sort of almost like a pattresses box. But what's really good with this is it's not a pattresses box. You can get ones that have a pattresses box, have a whole back on them, but this doesn't. This is just a frame. So this will just open up to the inside of the trunking without any plastic behind this to restrict the space for cables. So we'll mount this in here, inside the cupboard, and then what we'll do is we'll fit this brush plate. So this brush plate will essentially be mounted on the trunking. And then when we've got that sort of cable braid with all the cables in it, that braid will go into this brush plate and into the trunking. So essentially all you'll see is just the cable braid coming out of this brush plate and into the cupboard. And I think that's going to look really, really neat. So yeah, that's planned for the trunking there. So let's hope it all pans out and actually works. And yes, someone's being very inquisitive with trunking. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. But yeah, that's all the hardware we've got there. Okay, so that was a look at the hardware that we're going to be installing. So now we need to figure out some cable routes. And I've done a little bit more poking around, and I've basically resigned myself to cutting out huge bits of plasterboard, and I'll just go and buy more plasterboard and patch it all properly. Because there's also this wall here we need to run it all down through, but unfortunately there's not only timber at the ceiling level, there's also timber about here, and then obviously at the bottom of the wall, but also diagonally coming down here as well. So what I think I'm going to do is just cut a big chunk of this out just so I can see exactly what's going on, drill through all the timbers and everything, and then get it in. And I suspect that's why they brought the cables out here rather than doing it here, because it is a bit timber sort of running diagonally in here, which is really annoying. So we'll just need to patch it. I mean, it's in a cupboard, and you'll be able to, if you sand it all and paint it, you won't be able to see it, but we'll probably just patch it sort of roughly for now. So yeah, what I'll need to go and do is basically I'm going to go away and just start cutting and figuring out the access. I'll do that all off camera because I've done it before on video, and I'll show what I've done afterwards. But I'll go away, start cutting out and figure out the access, and I'll come back and show what access I've got once I've cut the holes and figure out how we're going to actually get these cables in. But yeah, time to go away and destroy my friend's walls. Okay, so now I'm back after figuring out some of the cable routes, and it's not gone quite to plan. I mean, who'd ever expect something I do to go to plan, but I've figured out a solution that I think will work, so we'll need to take a look. We'll take a look at that now. So what I've done is I've cut this wall open here, and I've also reopened that cut that was already done up there. That's why it's a weird shape, because it was originally 2 different cuts. So that was done before me, but I've reopened that. And I've worked out that we can run the conduit down this wall. It's got quite a big gap in it, so there's loads of space. The only downside is there's actually this big bit diagonal wood as well. Like, none of this will be structural, this is all just stud work, but it is just additional stuff I'll have to go through. But with this big access hole here, rather than drilling lots of small ones, I can easily go through this, and through the bit wood at the top of that, that gets me up into this area here, where I can then go up through this wood, which takes me up into the understairs, under the floor upstairs. That's where those original cables run, so they're already running up, they'll come out. And that'll get me under the floor upstairs. And when we go up there, we'll take a look at what's happened, because there's a bit of an issue. But what's also quite good here, and I'm not sure if I'll do it, I think I will, is whereas originally my plan was to bring the conduit down here and down this wall to pick up the connection for the TV. The problem is that this is curved. You might be able to see it. This is actually a curved bit of wall. So trying to do an angle on the conduit there is going to absolutely suck. So what I've looked at though, and actually is that down here, the camera barely fits, but down here you can see there's also this this stud here. But there's this little gap to the side of it here, just to the left of that, between the plasterboard and the stud. And that actually reaches into the area behind the TV. Now, unfortunately, I can't quite fit the conduit in that, But what I'm probably going to do here then is I'm going to drill through this stud here to bring the conduit. We'll go through that stud and slope down this wall to go behind the TV. So it'll come up through that void and then it'll come through that stud here. And then that'll bring it into this area here. So when the conduits from upstairs will come down, the conduit from the TV will come into here as well, and they'll all come out the bottom face of this wall into the trunking. So that should actually be a lot neater. It'll be a bit tight bend radius on it, but when we go upstairs, you'll see there's going to be a tight bend radius anyway that we're going to have to deal with, but we'll work it all out. But yeah, that's kind of the plan here. But now let's go upstairs and see what's happened, because it's not going to be as easy as I hoped. Okay, so here we are upstairs. The plan's kind of gone out the window a little bit. I cut this hole in the wall here with the intention of using it to drill down into the underfloor space and pull the two conduits up. And then I took the light switch off in preparation of bringing the conduits into the cupboard. This would have been a bit tricky anyway, because there's a wooden sort of noggin behind it for the back box to mount to, and that's very much in the way of where the conduits would need to go past. So the plan here was just to cut that noggin out with a multi-tool, put a dry lining box in instead, and then I could run the conduits up behind it. But there's also this horizontal noggin here that I wouldn't have been able to get the right angle to drill through the switch. I'd probably have to cut the wall out below and drill up, but I had that all planned out. But then I cut into the floor just to see what's under here. I was going to use my floor access cutter tool, but I thought the joists were in a different place anyway, and then because I'm cutting so close to a wall, it wouldn't have much space right at the edge here, so I cut a rectangle out and we'll just batten it up, put some wood under and screw it back down. It's in the corner of the room, so you're not going to get much weight here. However, unfortunately, what we've seen is there's a big giant stud right here. So that's right in the way of where I needed to bring the cables, so I can't bring the cables down out this wall into the underfloor space because this joist is right here. And the other side of this wall is the stairs, so there's basically no way that I can run it at the other side of this either. And as you can see, that's the original cables there that are running right up against it. I mean, you can see obviously they've caught that joist when they drilled down. So that plan hasn't exactly worked. So I've gone around under the floor poking with a bunch of rods and arms and trying to figure out what happens, the way it works. And it seems to be, there just seems to be joists everywhere. I think the main joists run this way across the building. And this is like an extra one for the stairs. And then there's a couple that run this way, but they're just like little pieces of I-joist, but not really attached onto anything. I think they're just using them for maybe a bit of support. So what I've done is I've poked around with the rod, and it turns out that if you go across the room, which is the office, there's another joist probably about here, like another I-joist about here. And then on the other side of this door, obviously, is a wall. And there isn't a joist below this wall, the joist's about here. So I think the plan now basically is just to bring the conduits up inside this wall, and I'll just take them all the way up to the attic because there's no cupboard to really bring them out of, so I'll just have to take them up to the attic and it'll do the job fine. So what we'll need to do is work out, first of all, how we're going to get through this I-joist, and second of all, get it up into this wall. It's a little bit annoying because obviously I've caused some destruction there anyway, and I'm going to have to create more destruction here, and obviously there's nothing on this wall, so I'll have to create like at least 2 access holes that'll just need filled, but realistically it's the only option I can think of, or actually the least destructive option. The other plan I had was to bring them up here. At this point I'd have only had space for 1 conduit, but there isn't any sort of joist below this, so I would have been able to do that. However, I cut into it just the tiniest little bit just to check, and weirdly this is metal stud work. Like, everything else seems to be timber, but this is just a bit metal here. So I don't know why they've done that. I don't know if it's just because it's like a really small piece or something, but yeah, this is all metal, and there's metal at the bottom there as well. So I didn't fancy trying to drill through that and work out how all that works, so I decided to bail on that plan, so I'll just need to plug that hole up again and that'll do. So yeah, gonna be a bit of making good to do, but oh well, these things happen. But yeah, so let's take a look in the other room and we'll see what I've done, what we can see through the hole I've made in the floor in there too. Okay, so here we are on the other side of that wall, and as you can see I've made another hole in the floor just behind the door, so again this won't take much weight, or won't have much weight put on it. And as you can see here, I can't fit the camera down, it's a bit big, but obviously there's some cables there. That's actually the cables to the, well, it's 2 Cat5s to the living room, and some other really, really thin, almost like flex cable, so no idea what that is. Try and get a marking of it. I wonder if it's, I think it's maybe like the doorbell. I bet it's like, it's like the doorbell, or like, it seems low voltage, I've no idea what that is. But those cables run there, and yeah, you can't see it, but there's an I-joist back in the other room, but there's nothing underneath this wall. So that means if I cut into this wall and drill down, I can absolutely get into the underfloor space. Now obviously I need to get through that I-joist, but there is already services running through them. They've just basically got sort of reasonably sized, almost like 25mm holes drilled just in the middle of the joist. But the good thing is on that joist I need to drill through, there's one pipe at the far end, but then nothing really in the middle where I actually need to go through. So I'm relatively comfortable, I can just drill through that eye joist and run the surfaces and that's fine. So the plan is just to get a drill down that hole, drill 2 holes through that eye joist and get the conduit through, and that should be fine. I'll need to be a bit careful because there is a couple of pipes, basically right before the eye joist there's a couple of heating pipes, and on the other side there seems to be a cold water supply pipe, or maybe a hot pipe, but some sort of water supply pipe. So I'll just need to be very careful not to drill through those, but at least I'm only going through a tiny little layer of OSB, so I just need to be very careful and just drill very gently and not put too much force on it. But yeah, that's the plan. So basically what I need to do now is try and drill through that eye joist, and then we'll come back once that's done. And if that all works, we can run the conduits. So now after an absolute epic, I'm back and I've got all the holes for the conduit drilled. And yeah, that was an absolute nightmare. Not only did the plan not exactly work and I had to try and reroute all the cables, but halfway through I managed to catch a nail with my drill bit. So I was just drilling through one of the joists and it obviously caught a nail. So my drill bit is now not very happy. And unfortunately everywhere's shut now at this time, so I wasn't able to get another one. So basically for every hole I did after I did this, I had to go through with, I think, first of all do it with like a 19mm spade bit, and then widen it out with this just to try and like ease the load on that drill bit, but got it all through eventually. So as you can see, I've got 2 holes, well 3, there's one didn't work, so 2 holes in the bottom of this joist here. Up inside there you'll see there's another 2 holes there. Up there you'll see there's another 2 on the left there. The one on the right was the original one, but I couldn't get the drill in to do it, so I've put 2 more in there. And that's basically all those holes through to upstairs. So I've not done anything on the bottom face yet, but basically I've got 2 holes through this for the conduit, 2 holes through the one here for conduit, and 2 holes up there for conduit. So now let's go upstairs and see what we've got up there. So here we are upstairs. As you can see under the floor in the office, there's those 2 holes there that I've also drilled. Again, that there is the old hole. It was just, I couldn't get the drill in to widen it up, so that's just left there, but I'll just fill that in. But yeah, that's those 2 holes for the conduit. And then what now happens is the conduit will come up, it'll run under this floor here, and round about here there's that eye joist. I've drilled 2 holes through that so I can pull the conduit through. And then finally here, I've now cut into the wall in the office again, and this is where we're going to bring the conduit up to upstairs. So what I've done is I've deliberately cut this within 150mm of the corner. I think the 150mm mark's here, so it's all within the wiring zones of being in the corner of a room, and I've drilled those holes down there into the underfloor space. Now bizarrely and quite surprisingly, it turns out that a lot of the stud walls here are all like metal studs, which I've not seen like in a new built house. I don't know if it's this like wood shortage, because this place was built, I think, around about 2021, I think, so I wonder if it was that whole wood prices thing, they've actually moved over to metal studs. So it is wood below that, but then obviously there was this metal, so basically I had to cut the metal out with a hole saw that was a bit wider, and then cut a smaller hole with a drill bit through it, so it was a bit of a pain, but got there eventually. But the good thing is that there actually isn't any horizontal studs across this wall, it seems. I don't know if that's maybe something due to the steel framing. So there's actually a clear run from here all the way up to the attic. Now I have no idea what the top of the wall's made of yet, like if there's timber in there or if it's all metal. I know there's metal up there, but I don't know if there's any timber or anything. So I'll need to investigate that. But what I'm really hoping I can do is I can drill down into that wall from the attic, and I won't need to cut an access hole. But it really depends, because if there's lots of wood and then there's metal, I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't have a drill bit that can go through wood, go through the metal. I have to use a hole saw for that, so we'll see. But at the very least, I've got all the holes ready to bring the conduit up to here. Now it's getting quite late, so I don't really want to be running power tools, and I broke my drill bit, so I can't really do much more today around getting this in the attic, and I don't really fancy going up in the attic at this time of night. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the conduit running. So I'm going to run the conduit from downstairs up to here, and given I've got so much of it, I'll just pull up enough to get into the attic plus a little bit excess, and obviously tomorrow I can actually go and pull it properly up into the attic. The only problem is I just didn't think, and I used a 25mm drill bit to fit the 25mm conduit. And while that sounds fine on paper, it does mean that all the holes are extremely tight. The one in the eye joist is okay because it was a very thin bit of, well, eye joist, whatever the material is, OSB or something. So for that I used a 32mm hole saw, so it's actually a little bit wider, so it's really easy to get through. But the problem is, because the only drill bit I had was 25mm for the biggest one, all the holes that have to go through a lot of timber, I've had to use that. So it is kind of tight. Now I think I'll be able to do it. I've tested all these with an offcut and I can sort of force it through, but it might be tricky. So we'll see if I can get all the conduit through. If I can, great. If not, I might need to go out tomorrow and buy a wider drill bit and then widen these holes out, but hopefully I don't have to because that'd be annoying. So yeah, what I'll now do is I'll go away off camera because it'd be a pain to do it on camera. I'll put all the flexi conduit in, and hopefully I can get the conduit from the understairs cupboard to here and just leave a big bit of excess so we can get it up the attic tomorrow. And we're back, and I've got the first run of conduit installed. And to be honest, it wasn't actually too hard to put in. I was really worried about these holes being, exactly sized. And sure enough, when you're pushing a bit conduit through it, it is really tight. And that's what I was testing when I was doing it. I was trying to push a bit conduit in. But when you're pulling the conduit from the other side, it's actually okay because it's got this sort of concertina effect. So when you've got it in tension, when you're pulling it, it stretches out and slightly narrows. Whereas when you're pushing it and it's in compression, it compresses and slightly widens, and that was the issue I was having. So what I found the best way to do it is just sort of force it through the hole as best you can until you've got a little bit sticking out the other side. And you can do it, especially if you twist it, you will get it through. And once it's sticking out the other side of the hole, I then found grabbing it with a pair of pliers and pulling it just to get enough length, and then just pull it with my hands the rest of the way. And by doing that, that stretched out enough and it pulled through perfectly fine. I was able to literally leave the real flexi-con down here, go upstairs and pull it through all those 3 bits of wood without any problem at all. Now, one problem I have had though is getting the cable all the way from here up to the attic. Obviously the conduit isn't all the way up the attic yet, it's just going up the office, but I've got the right length in. And I tried pushing a bit Cat 6 up, and I got it essentially as far as being halfway up the upstairs wall towards the attic, so got it most of the way. But after a point, the amount of tension or force it requires to push the cable through causes the cable to start buckling in the conduit and you can't get enough force to push it the rest of the way. And that's only with one cable, so having 4 or 5 in these, which I think I'll probably be able to get about 5 in each of these, is just not going to be viable to really force it all through. I tried putting in a sort of pull wire, so I've just used this, the washing line I've used in every network install video. Stuff's absolutely great. And I tried basically putting that in and thinking, well, if I get that into the conduit, can I just tie Cat 6 on, pull it through, pull it back, pull more through? But even that is really, really stiff. And it was doable with one cable. You could pull one cable through all the way. But I think if you had, several cables in the conduit, it's just going to get too much to pull through, really. But all's not lost, because I've got another plan that still makes the conduit very useful. And that is that I'll cut the conduit into 3 different sections. So I'll have one piece of conduit from here to under the floor upstairs, another piece of conduit from under the floor in the office to under the floor in the bedroom, basically where we've got the 2 access holes in the floor, so a bit of conduit between the 2 access holes, and then a final bit of conduit that goes from under the floor in the office, in the bedroom, up in the wall to the attic. And I've got those access panels on the floor. What I'll do when I repair them is I'll repair them in such a way that they're easy enough to open up again. And that way, if someone did ever want to run cables in the future, they can still push cables through this bit of conduit to under the floor, pop their hand under the floor, feed it the rest of the way, and it still makes it a lot easier because now you're not having to, get a bit of cable through these 3 bits of wood, or 4 when you include the bottom plate. Once all the wall's fixed, you can get past through this whole bit of wall with the wall all repaired. And likewise upstairs, you can get it through under the floors, which you wouldn't really need the conduit for, but it does make it a lot easier. And then to get it into the wall upstairs, you can get it all the way from the bottom, underneath the wall under the floor, all the way up to the attic, again without having to cut into the walls. So that'll still make it very easy to replace the cables once the walls are repaired. So to be honest, it's not really much worse than the original plan. It literally just means that you might have to lift the floor up occasionally and lift that little access panel out to pull a bit of cable through. And to be honest, that's not a problem. It's dead easy to do. So yeah, I'll cut the conduits and we'll sort of go from there. But what I'll do is, before I show you all that, I'll get the other conduit in, get them all cut and set up properly, and then I'll show you how we're going to do it going forwards. Because I haven't shown in a while, here's the dog. He's being a very good boy. Yeah. I wasn't sure how he'd be when I was doing all the work, because obviously I'm literally coming into his house and ripping holes in the walls. But he's actually been really well behaved. He's actually, he's almost like, he's not helping obviously, but he's not actually getting in the way. Like, there's one point I'm sitting with my head looking through a hole in the floor trying to figure out how to get the conduit up, and he's just sort of sitting next to me with his head sort of looking down the hole with me. He was like trying to join in. But yeah, he's actually been really good. I just feel if there's a dog in a house that I'm filming in, I have to show the dog because he is adorable. But now he's going to fall asleep, so let you sleep. Okay, so now the 2 conduits in, and as I mentioned before, I've split them at each point. So they run up above the ceiling here, they split, they run through to the office, they split there, and then they go up into the wall, and eventually will go up the attic. So 2 here that run from here all the way up, and throughout the route you'll see I've labelled all the conduits basically 1 and 2. So 1 up and 2 up. Up just indicates direction, so that's indicating these go upstairs. And then when you'll see upstairs, we've got up and down, so it means it makes it clear which one's which. So that's the 2 conduits going up to under the floor upstairs. So let's run upstairs, take a look under the floor up there, and see what we've got there. So here we are upstairs. We've got the other end of these conduits. So we can see we've got 1 and 2, so that's 1 down and 2 down. So that's the other end of those. So it's when it's labelled up, it means it's coming from downstairs, and when it's labelled down, it means it's going 2 downstairs. Likewise, we've got the other 2 conduits here, so you can see that is labelled 2 up, and that one there is labelled, obviously, 1 up. And obviously these are indicating that they're going up to the attic, so they're going towards the attic, so these go through under the office floor to under the floor in the guest bedroom. So here we are in the guest bedroom, and we've got the other ends of those conduits. So we can see we have 2 down and 1 down, so these are the 2 from the other room that goes eventually, these go through to the office, and then that goes through to downstairs. And then we have, and again, they've got the glands on to stop them pulling out. And then here we have these ones, which are labelled 2 up and 1 up. These will go up the attic. So we'll show you the other end of those, and then we'll get them put up into the attic. So now here we are back in the office on the other side of the wall from that hole in the floor, and that's where those 2 conduits come up. So they come up through this wall, and there's just obviously a huge length of excess that I've put on. Obviously we have far too much conduit, so loads of excess, and that's again 1 down, the other one's 2 down. So that's the down direction of that. These will go up to the attic. So also we've got this big void in the wall here. All the way up there is the attic. So what we're going to do is run these cables or conduits through the wall up to the attic. So now here we are up in the attic. I apologise if the audio's a bit rubbish. I've got a mask on because obviously there's insulation everywhere. This is the one downside of these new build houses. I mean, it's great that they're really warm, but there's so much insulation, it's an absolute nightmare. So we've rolled some of it back to get in. And basically the wall that we need to access is inconveniently right under this board, but I'm going to go and see if we can work out what that wall's made of and how the top of the wall works, because I really need to work out how we could drill down into that wall and get those conduits up. So let's try and get over there, figure it out, and ideally not fall through the ceiling, because that would be slightly problematic if I did. So let's see if I can survive. Okay, so now I think I've found the top of that wall. So what we seem to have here is, sorry, I'm just falling down. We have the wall that I want to run the conduit in here, and then the other wall that's sort of running perpendicular to that is here. And what's really good is they've brought the metal up to the attic, and the plasterboard is butted up against it. And even though there's this wood here above the wall we want, if you look down there, you can see there is metal. So that's a really good sign, because that means I don't need to worry about having a long drill bit that can bore through wood and then through the metal. What I'm hoping I can do is use a hole saw to take this wood out, potentially a slightly larger hole saw, and then use a smaller hole saw through the metal. And assuming that's the right wall, I'll definitely double check. I'll probably put a small pilot hole through first just to definitely check I'm in the right place. That means I can bring the conduit up the attic really easily. Now the other thing, I'm not quite sure how well it'll work, so we can always try it, is my initial plan was just to basically bring the conduit up and just have the bare ends just sitting up here. But because we've got the metal directly here, what I might try and do is drill a larger hole out of this wood and then use one of these Flexicon glands. So I can potentially have this coming up through the metal and properly gland it in. So we'll see if that works. It might not, but if that works, that'll be a really neat solution if they're properly glanded in. But at the very least, I found the top of the wall there, and I've got direct access to the metal, so that should be really, really good. So yeah, that's the plan. Time to figure it out. So what I'll do is I'll first of all just drill a really small hole through this as like a pilot hole, just to check that I'm definitely in the right place, so I can poke a rod down, make sure I'm in the right place. And once we've done that, we'll try and hole saw this wood out with a bigger hole saw, and then cut a hole through the metal with a smaller hole saw. And hopefully we can get those 2 bits of conduit up into the attic. Cool, so I've just drilled a hole out here to test, and dropped a rod down there which literally fell through the hole. But that leads perfectly into the right place in the office. So yeah, that works. So what I need to just do is hole saw out this bit of wood, cut through into the metal, and get the conduit up into the attic. Cool, so now I've drilled those out. So I've drilled out the wood with a larger hole saw, and then drilled out the metal with a smaller hole saw. And even though it's a bit too big for the gland, that is still a suitable size for the gland to fit. So I'll definitely try and gland it in, because I think that would look really neat. And then we can safely bring the cables up and clip them along, but I think if we can gland that in, that would be so much nicer to sit under the insulation. So, time to do that. And the good thing is, because I'm obviously cutting the conduit at different parts, I've got all that excess. So what I can do is I can put the gland on the end, bring it up to here, obviously leaving loads of slack into the wall, but I can pull the excess into the underfloor space and cut it shorter. So I think that's actually going to be a really neat solution. So, time to get the glands on and get the conduit pulled up into the attic. Okay, so that's the conduit glanded in, so that's actually worked out really well. So basically brought the two conduits up, put the glands in around the metal, and they're now securely held in. And I'm really happy with how that's turned out, so that's great. So we can now very easily bring the cables down here and in and out that conduit without having to really worry about, any slack conduit sticking up here. And then we've pulled the excess down under the floor and cut it off. So I'll show you now what we've got downstairs in the office, and then let's figure out how we're going to run the ports in. So here we are in the office, where I've obviously pulled the conduits a lot tighter, and that's now really neat, so they're now really nicely running vertically. I was a bit worried about the fact, like, those holes up there being off to the side, but actually they're not. They are perfectly in line with here, so that's great. So they're all perfectly running in zone 150mm from the corner, so that's great. Definitely dead happy with how that's turned out. So yeah, now let's look at where we're installing the ports. So here we are under the desk in the office, and as you can see, we've just got a normal main socket. And what we're going to do is we're going to install a network point alongside this. So we'll probably just put it along the side, somewhere off to one side of it. I'm not obviously sure where the vertical studs run in this wall. So what I'll do is I'll take that socket off and work out from behind that where all the studs are, so we can try and figure out what's happening. It'll also be interesting to see how they've attached those boxes inside that wall. Like, have they just used, I presume they just use dry lining boxes, or is there some smart way to mount a metal box inside that wall? Not sure. But yeah, we'll pop that socket off and see where the studs are. But before we do that, we'll take a look at the other side of the wall, and we're going to work out where we're going to fit the other port. But bear in mind where that socket is, because I'll be referring to that in the next bit. So here we are on the other side of that wall, and there was a wall-mounted TV here that I've just taken down for this section. And the TV has a huge space above the bracket mount, so we'll be putting the sockets in around here to keep them out of the way, but they'll still be behind the TV. Now, in terms of where we're going to put the network port, all I was going to do is put the network point in, but I suspect he probably will want a socket for the TV. I don't know if I'll do it in this video, but if he was going to put a socket in for the TV, the most sensible thing to do would be spur off that socket in the office that's exactly the other side of this wall. Now that socket is basically placed about here on the other side of the wall, obviously lower down, but it's in this position in relation to the bracket. Now that's a bit too far off to the right, but in terms of wiring zones, obviously need to be vertical in line with an accessory. I think if I put the socket here offset slightly to the left, so that they still sort of overlap each other, that would be fine, because the cable will still be vertically in line with both sockets. It'll just go between the two. So if he was to ever add a main socket for this TV, it would probably be around about here. So what that means for the network point, I'll put that more off to the side here. That way they can be kept away from each other, but it means that the socket can be added in. So if I added a network socket here, then that would get in the way of a future potential main socket. So yeah, I'll put the network socket sort of towards the left here. And then we'll see where that comes up in relation to the other side of the wall as well, because if I can just drop 4 cables down one hole, that would be really easy. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yep, time to pop that socket off in the office and see where the studs are. Okay, so I took that socket off in the office and then used the space behind it to try and work out where the studs were, and then totally messed it up and hit a stud. It turns out these metal studs, even though the actual vertical is like, way over here, they've got a huge overhang, so I've just caught just the edge of it. It's fine, that just needs a little polyfill, a bit of paint, it's fine, it's behind the TV, and that'll obviously rub off, it's just pencil. But yep, I've cut a box in here, and that's gone in absolutely fine. And you can maybe see down there's the edge of the metal stud, so it was really close to it, but we've just got a massive overhang that I didn't realise. But I suppose this is how you learn things, isn't it? But yep, that's in there, and that's perfectly fine. So what I'll now need to do is, obviously I need to cut another box in on the other side, back in the office. We'll just have them basically both above each other, so I'll have one port here, and one port in the office just on the opposite side of this wall lower down. Just keeps it all nice and straight cable runs. So all I need to do is go up in the attic, move an absolute ton of insulation out of the way, and work out where this is, where basically above this is in the attic. And all you need to do is drill down, run the cables in, drill down, get the space, and then we can start running cables. Okay, so here we are up in the attic. There's the grommet holes we've put in before, and there's that wall. So I've measured off that wall, and I've moved all the insulation, and I've worked out that roughly down there, basically where the insulation stops, there's that bit wood in front. Basically just in front of that is where those ports are, so that's perfectly fine. So what I'm going to try and do is something very similar to what I've done here, where I'll use a larger hole saw to cut out a big bit of this wood just to get some space, and then I'll use a smaller hole saw in the middle. I think this time I'll try and use a 22mm, it's the smallest I've got, and then into that hole I'll try and fit a normal 20mm grommet. It might be a bit loose, but we'll see, hopefully I can get it to fit. and that should be quite neat. I might have to do 2 holes next to each other because obviously we'll be needing to get 4 cables in for all those ports, and that might be a bit tight through a 20mm grommet. I think you can do 4, so I might try it. But yeah, so I just need to obviously measure again because I just did a very brief measurement. So I'll do a proper measurement, get an exact space, cut a bigger hole through the wood, cut a smaller hole through the metal, and hopefully get some sort of grommet in there. And that's done. So as you can see, I've cut out a larger hole here in the wood, and I've cut out a smaller hole in the middle and put a grommet in. This is just a normal sort of 20mm grommet that you'd have in a socket back box. That fits in there really nicely, and that'll perfectly protect the cables while they're going through that hole. So you don't need to worry about that. And yeah, you definitely need to do something with that because it's quite sharp. I don't know how they've done it in the rest of the place, but most of the cables here come up from the floor. There's not much going through the ceiling, it's only lighting. And I can't really see any of the lights and see how they've done it, but yeah, I feel that's a good way of protecting the cable. Okay, so here we are through in the office, and I've cut out this box as well. Now, I had a bit of an issue here, because what I wanted to do is put the box in here directly below the one in the bedroom, just so I can drop the cables down that one hole from the attic. But when I tried cutting in here, interestingly I was hitting something, and I thought, it can't be a stud, because I've measured it properly, and it turns out I have. For some reason, in this sort of cavity, the stud's probably about here, and for some reason at the bottom of the wall here, there's like a sort of wooden structure. It's almost like goes up, along, and then goes down. I don't know if it's something to do with the radiator mounting, but I don't think it is. It almost looks like it was put in originally for a back box to be mounted on, and the electricians had decided not to use it, possibly it wasn't deep enough, and then they've used dry lining boxes over here. So yeah, for some reason I can't cut into that, so that's a little bit annoying. So that's fine. All I've done is I've measured off this socket, the stud's here, and I've cut a box in here, so that'll work perfectly fine. It just means that I'll have to drill another hole from the attic, so I'll have one hole in the attic to serve the bedroom, and the other hole will serve the office, but that's perfectly fine. So just need to nip up to the attic, drill another one of those holes and put a grommet in it, and then we can start running the cables. Well, a little bit more to do, but then at least all this cable route will be sort of figured out and finished. So there we go, that's that second hole with the grommet made. So there's one down there, and then the one we had before there. So this one will serve the bedroom, that one will serve the office, and they're positioned perfectly. So if you look directly down those holes, you can see the top of the back box basically perfectly in line, so that's really good. So with that, we're almost ready to run the cables. The only thing we need to do now is get that trunking installed in the hall cupboard, because for that we need to get the conduits through into the trunking, and once all the conduits are in the trunking, cut to length, we can start fishing all the cables. So let's go get that conduit in. Okay, so now we're downstairs, and I've got the 2 conduits poked out the wall. They do snake a little bit, but it's because I wanted them to come out this face of the wall and have the trunking a bit lower down. So that's them poking out there, and as you can see, I've put the fire sealant around it. Big thick bead of it round the side, really deep in. Really hard to squeeze that stuff out, but that's all in there now. So what I now need to do is get that trunking holes drilled in that trunking, and get the trunking put over. Now, the problem I have had is, I mentioned earlier, my plan to get the TV ports was to use that hole I drilled in there. Or, can't really see it, but there's a hole down there. Unfortunately, there's a bit of horizontal wood that goes across, and it means I can't get the trunking, the conduit in, it just hits it, I can't get the bend. So I've got another plan. Not as neat, but it'll do. So let's take a look at what we'll do for that. Okay, so my plans for the TV port isn't going to be super neat, but it'll do. Obviously the TV port, the conduit's going to be inside this wall here, which is that void under the stairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this fire-rated dry lining box that I'm not using upstairs now, somewhere around here. That also preserves the fire integrity of the underside of the stairs. And I can gland the flexible conduit into the back of this, so it'll come to this box on the wall here. What I've then got is a blanking plate. I can put that over the front of this, and I can drill a hole through the front of the blanking plate, so that'll be on the wall like that. And then I'm going to put another flexible conduit gland into the front of the blanking plate. So essentially what you'll see is a blanking plate flush on the wall, with flexible conduit glanded into the front coming out, and how the flexible conduit will come out, come up at an angle, and go into the side of the trunking. I'll gland it into the side of the trunking. So there will be a bit of flexible conduit on show, and unfortunately it's black stuff I've got, so it'll be quite visible, but it's in the back of a cupboard, it's not really a big deal. And I feel that's a lot easier than my original plan, which was to try and put the trunking down here and down here, which involves cutting a lot of trunking for only 4 cables. It's actually quite bulky because it's a lot of trunking, and I'd have to try and mount trunking around this weird sloped wall and this step, and that was just going to be a total pain. So we'll just give this a go. Should be a neat enough solution, should be a lot easier. So try this out and see how well it works. So yep, next stage is to get that sort of weird conduit back box blank plate assembly put in, and get the trunking mounted up here. So yeah, hopefully by the time you come back, the trunking will be in place, and that'll all be ready. And then we can start fishing cables. Okay, so that's the trunking now mounted. So mounted it there, drilled two 25mm holes at the back, you can access the conduit through, and mounted it with far too many screws. It definitely didn't need that many. Turns out this stuff's actually really, really rigid, so that's pretty good. So definitely using proper dado trunking in the future, because that's really strong. Then if we come along the back here, we've got the plan I've got for the TV ports. So as you can see, what I've done is I've glanded the conduit into the trunking here, brought it down and drilled out a blanking plate, and then glanded the conduit into that as well. And then in the wall we've got this fire-rated dry lining box, and glanded some more conduit into the back of that. So what we can do is this blanking plate can also mount on top of this, so that'll mount on like that, and that'll sort of look like that, which is neat enough. Definitely a lot easier than trying to mount conduit over that sloped wall and stuff. So I can go in there like that, and have all the cables run through. And then if the cables run into that conduit there, that conduit runs through the back of this wall here, and then it comes out into this box here. So you probably just about make it out. There's more flexible conduit glanded into the back there. I've got that box there. So we'll have 4 network points here with conduit all the way through to there, then up into the trunking. And then we'll mount the brush plate somewhere around here on the back of the trunking here. And that means the cables can all come out, so that should be pretty good. Now, the next thing to do is, as I mentioned, we've got these ports here that came with the building. I want to work out what to do with these. Ideally, I want to bring these up into the wall and into the trunking. But as far as I can tell, this is actually a dot and dab wall onto like breeze blocks, so I don't know how easy it'll be to pull these cables up. So we'll see. If we can, great. If not, we'll just have to leave these down here. But fingers crossed we can move these up into the trunking. But I'll take a look at those, work out what we're going to do with them, and then we can start actually pulling all the cables in. Okay, so I've pulled this plate off, and unfortunately I can't pull any of those cables. It's definitely a dot and dab wall, and I think either some of the adhesive's been put over the cables or it's just clipped in really tightly and it's not going to come out. So I won't be able to pull these up into the wall, as was made in the original plan. So the cheaty option would just be to put those on and run additional cables from that into the rack. But I want everything to come out the trunking in a single big bundle. So what we're going to do is, looking at the sort of equipment we've got and stuff we've got to hand, what I think I'll do is I've got loads of that dado trunking left over. I'll put a little bit of dado trunking over the top here, just blanking it off basically, and I can join these cables through inside that trunking. I'll put a flexicon gland in the top of it and bring the flexicon up, out the top and into the main trunking that way. And that'll be fine. And because there's this big open reach box next to it anyway, having the trunking coming out to the same depth won't really impact the use of the cupboard at all, so I think we'll do that. So yeah, we'll get that in there. And then finally, we can run some cables. Okay, so that's that in. So I've got a bit of trunking cut down here, and I've landed some flexible conduit into the top there, and that runs up and into the main trunking at the top there. So what we'll do is we'll use those inline joiners that I showed before, join these cables inside this trunking here, and run them up. But before we do that, we now need to run the rest of the cables in. So need to get all the cables pulled through this trunking and through to upstairs. Okay, so I've pulled in the first set of runs. So there's 8 runs here. 4 of these will go to the ports upstairs, 2 for each AP, and we're also going to put 2 ports up in the attic. So they're coming out the trunking there, or out the conduit there, into the trunking, along through these steel bands we've put in, so we just screw these into the back. That just holds it up, means the trunking cover can come off without the cables falling out. Along here again, and then through where the brush plate will go. And we've left a huge bit of excess just in case it's ever required. So we'll probably lose loads of this, but I want to leave enough of a big loop behind the cabinet so the cabinet could easily be slid out with the cable still attached. So we've got that there. So now let's take a look at what we've got upstairs. So here we are upstairs, and as you can see, we've pulled all the cables out the floor in the office. And what I've basically done is I've pulled what is at least enough length. I've left a bit of excess. There's going to be a load of excess, but we've got so much cable it makes it easier to do it this way. If you're doing a big, a lot of this, you'd probably have like multiple boxes and pull from each box simultaneously. But because we don't have that, I've just measured the I've just measured the right length. So they're pulling out there and currently bundled up in the hall. So at this point, the living room AP will just come straight out here and go straight down through the ceiling, so that won't carry through the conduit. The rest of this will continue through the conduit, so we'll pull them through the other 2 conduits, through here into the guest bedroom, and then from the guest bedroom we'll pull them up this wall and into the attic. So time to pull through the rest of the conduits. Okay, so here we are in the guest bedroom. We can see we've pulled the cables through the conduits again, so all the cables that were in conduit 1 are now pulled back through to conduit 1. And for conduit 2, we've pulled 2 of the cables through that will go up the attic, and the cable for the living room access point hasn't been pulled through and is still in the office because that'll drop through the ceiling there. So yeah, what we now need to do is get these pushed through the other 2 conduits that'll take them up the wall and into the attic. So here we are through in the office, and as you can see we have the cables going between the conduits. So we can see this cable is conduit 1, so it comes from downstairs, and the cables connect across through to the conduit that goes through to the guest bedroom. And for conduit 2, it's the same deal. They come from the conduit that comes from downstairs, and they come up and go through that conduit that goes through to the guest bedroom, apart from this one, which is the access point for downstairs, because that'll come up and it'll go through the floor or the ceiling downstairs round about directly below here. So we've pulled it out here and that'll be pushed through for the access point. So yeah, time to get the rest of these cables pulled up into the attic. Cool, so in the guest bedroom, that's the cables now all linked between the two conduits and pushed up to the attic. So let's take a look up there. And here we are up in the attic where all the cables have come through. So we've got these three cables coming out of this conduit. Two of these will go to the attic port, which I'm just going to install basically here somewhere. I'm just going to basically bring them along under all this insulation, up one of these posts and just stick it here, just so it's easy to access from standing up the ladder. So you can stand up the ladder and easily connect up to the ports. And then over here, we have the other four ports that are coming out the other conduit, and these will go down there to the two rooms. So they're going to run down the side of that joist there and pop over and down those two holes into the rooms. To fix it on, obviously I could just use 4 cable clips, just use cable clips for each cable. That's going to be quite a lot of cables all sort of tacked down that joist, and that's going to be a bit of a pain. So what I think I'll do is I'll use a cable clip and then a zip tie, so I'll put a cable clip into each bit as it goes along, put a zip tie around each cable clip and use the zip tie to hold all 4 cables as one big bundle. Saves a lot on the clips and that'll probably work perfectly fine. So yeah, we'll do that there. So yeah, time to get these cables clipped along and drop down into the walls, and we'll get those ports terminated first, and then we'll work out these ones. Oh, and the other cable here, one of these will go for the access point, which will probably be placed round about down here. So it'll just come again under the insulation, through the ceiling, and go into the access point. So yeah, time to get all those cables run down into the walls. So there we go, I've just clipped all those cables. I've just put one cable clip in every so often, put a zip tie around it. I'll cut the excess off. So it swoops out there, runs down there, over and under the various beams, just to sort of keep it reasonably low down. I kind of wanted to keep it vaguely in the middle so it's not too close to the plasterboard in case someone ever screws up, but also not too close to the top. Obviously this will all be covered by insulation. So it comes down here, and as you can see here, it comes off at this point, down that hole to serve the bedroom, and off of here, down that hole to serve the office. And as you can see, both these holes have grommets in them to protect the cable. So I'm dead happy with how that's turned out. And obviously down in both rooms now got dry lining boxes installed with the cables hanging out ready to be terminated. So now the next thing we need to do is get the cables down that conduit to serve the TV. So that's TV ports in. So we've got the 4 cables coming out there, and they come up into the cupboard, through that blanking plate with Flexicon on it, up into the trunking, and join the big bundle that's coming out. Likewise for the points that were originally down here, they go into that trunking there that will join them through in, come up the flexible conduit, up into this trunking, and all the cables join together and come out in this big bundle here. So loads of cables here, but I'll put that in that nice big sort of cable sock sleeve stuff to make it look really nice. And it all comes through that little sort of pattress fixing up there that we'll put a brush plate over. So we'll need to cut the trunking lids down, but that's fine. So yeah, that's almost there. So really the thing we need to now do is start putting the jacks on. So we'll go around and get some wall plates put on, get the keystone jacks put on these cables, and get the patch panel installed. So here we are in the guest bedroom with the port behind the TV. So what I need to do is get some of these jacks on. So I've got the cables already pulled through, and obviously they're numbered on the ends. So all we need to do is put the Euro modules on, which is you punch down on the back, and then we'll just mount the Euro module faceplates and put them in. So we basically need to do that to the ports here, the ports in the office, ports in the living room, get the keystone jacks on for the patch panel, and then do the stuff in the attic and the access points and stuff as well. But next step is to get these Euro module plates on. So I won't do it actually on camera and show how to do it because it's punching down onto a thing, but I'll get one on, show how it's done, and then we'll continue to get the rest done. There we go, so that's that jack terminated. So I've just punched down into it, brought the cable directly out the back at a 45-degree angle. These jacks are actually quite nice because you can bring the cable out either straight out the back, out the bottom there, or out the top here. So that's kind of nice, you can actually bring it out depending on the way it's going into your back box. So we've brought it out at this angle here, which is really nice for these boxes where it's coming out the top. But if we're running it at the bottom of the box, you could actually bring it out there. Which is quite a lot nicer than those XL modules that I used in my flat, because with those you had the keystone and it had to come out the top, which is fine if you're coming in from the top of your back box, but if you're coming in from the bottom, that could be really tricky to swoop around sort of quite thick Cat6. So that's pretty neat there. So yeah, it's in there. Mounted in the faceplate. The colour match is actually quite good, because I was worried mixing modules from Ultima and a Data faceplate, but actually the colour match is pretty much bang on. It's a little bit different, but no worse than the original stuff in this flat, in this house, so nice to see that. So yeah, that one's in. Time to get all the others terminated, get them screwed back and get them labelled. So yep, time to go and do all that, and then we can work on the patch panel. Okay, so we've now got the ports in the office and the guest bedroom done. Obviously there's still the TV ones to do and the ones up, the access point and the attic stuff. But what I want to do is get the keystone jacks put on the other ends of those 4 ports we've put in just now, just to test them out, just to mentally have a bit of progress, we can finally feel like we're doing something. So all the cables are coming in here, and for the patch panel we just need to put these keystone jacks on. So they're just standard tool-free keystones. These are the ones I tend to use because they're so easy to terminate. You basically put the wires in that thing at the end and clip it in, so I'll show how we do that. And what we'll do is we'll put those on the end of the four cables that we've already terminated, just to test them out. But before I do that, I want to get that sort of big sort of sock over those cables, just because I don't know how well that'll go on if all these jacks are on the end. So we'll get that sock over all the cables and get those keystones on. Okay, so we've now got the cables inside the big sort of cable braid, so you can see that comes out here, put a zip tie around it to keep it in place, and then I've got the pattresses, so that'll be where the brush plate will mount. Comes all the way down here, we've got the brush plate over it, that'll need to go in a minute, but I need to cut down the trunking cover first. That then snakes down through this big long trunking thing, or braid, which looks quite neat. Another zip tie to keep it secure, and all the cables come out the end. So now what we need to do is put the keystone jacks on. So I've got these ones here, which are the ones we've used, which are, again, Ultima brand. It's a brand I've not used before, but they seem basically the same as the Kinetics or XL ones I've used before. Where what you do is you get this little guide that you put over the end of the cable like that. You bring all the wires up through the guide, and you basically put them through little slots, and you line them all up like that. And then all you do is you cut them off flush at the edge, take that connector, plug it into the back of the keystone jack, matching up the colours, and then you basically just push it down and clip this jack shut. And when you clip that shut, it'll push this piece forward and it'll engage it and make all the connections. Although interestingly, these keystone jacks, even though they are the toolless type, they do actually come with an option to use a tool, which I've not seen before. So you get that there with that little piece here, but they also come with one of these little covers like the rest of the modules have. So what it looks like you could do, I've not tried it, but what it looks like you could do with this is you could actually punch down onto that with your regular IDC tool and then clip that over it to secure the wires in place. I don't really know why you would not use the toolless nature, but equally these can be kind of fiddly, so it may be a case you actually prefer using the tool, in which case you can, which is quite nice. So it's nice to have that option with these. But yeah, what we need to do is cut those flush and connect it into the keystone jack. So there we go, that's it all cut off flush like that. So we can take the keystone jack and connect it off. So there we go, that's now connected. So yep, put the connector in the back, clipped it shut, and that's now on. So what I now need to do is go and get a cable tester, check this out, and fingers crossed it works. And if it does, I've got a lot more of them to do. So that'll be fun. Okay, so we connect the tester up, and unfortunately, as we can see, wire 3 at this end hasn't been connected, so we'll need to figure that out. But I'm just using this sort of CCTV tester thing I've made videos on before. Link's in the description if you want to buy it. This thing's absolutely great because, as you can see, it's actually told me which end the problem's at. So you can see it says the problem is at the meter end, which is here, not the other end. So that's ideal because now I know that this is the problem. With those little blinky light testers you get, you know, ones that have the numbers that just count down in order, they're a total pain because they'll tell you that wire 3 isn't connected, but you won't have a clue which end it's at, and you'll have to re-terminate both. So that's made it very clear that the problem's at this end, so I can pop this jack open, see what's wrong with it, and fix it. So yeah, when I made this video I mentioned that this feature could be worth its weight in gold, and it really is, because this could save so much time, especially on this job with this many cables. So yeah, time to fix that, and we'll hope to have a working connection. Cool, so I've re-terminated that, and that's now showing a perfect connection, which is good. It turns out when I'd done this, I'd obviously nicked one of the inner cores and stripped the insulation off, and that had broken it, so that's all that was. But yeah, this tester is absolutely worth its weight in gold for showing actually which end was broken, so that's really good. So yeah, that's our first working run in. Now to do a lot more of them. So we're still working on getting all those keystones on, but that's just taking an absolute age, so we're just still doing that in the background, but I've now got all the trunking put together, so I put the top on that and put the brush plate in, and that looks so neat. I'm so happy with how this has turned out. So the final thing we really need to do in this cupboard is this down here. So this is where we have the original runs that came with the house. The new cables here, I'm going to join them together. So we'll take a look at the joiners we're going to use, join them together in this trunking, put the cap back on, and then that'll be ready as well. So these here are the inline joiners we're using, and again these are Ultima brand. And I wanted to try these out because they seem a bit nicer than the ones I've used before that are just basically IDC terminals that you punch down onto. These are actually rated up to Cat6A, but they do state they're backwards compatible with Cat6 and Cat5, so that's what we need here. And they seem like quite a neat design. So you've got this sort of metal butterfly mechanism here, and they've got these little rubber plugs, but I think these just literally are just so it doesn't like lock itself shut in transit, so you can just pull those out. And then you can see in there's those pins, and you've got this guide here. So what you basically do is, it's got the two different colouring schemes here. You push the wires through those holes there, presumably just until they stop, so the top row will go to there and the bottom row will go all the way to the end. And you place this sort of face down inside the connector there. You'll peel that label off, and then you basically, I think you just clip it shut, and that should work. It also comes with these strain reliefs that you can put on. I don't think I'll bother with these just because it's going in quite a tight space, and it's not going to actually get strained because it's not like it's actually sitting in line on a cable that's being moved. But it does come with these strain reliefs if you were doing something like that. So yeah, these seem pretty neat. So we'll try these out, and I'll let you know how I get on, but hopefully these are quite a nice little option. Cool, so I've just terminated those into there. So basically it's quite neat. All you do is you push the lower ones through, and the top ones just sort of rest in that sort of gap. You can see I've already cut off the solid brown. So all you do is cut off the excess on the top to line up with that ridge, and cut off the excess on the bottom. And in theory that should push down into the connector. I've never done these ones before, but if this works, seems like quite a neat solution. Cool, so that's those 3 joins in. Apart from the fact I'm having to lean over all this stuff to get it in that's not very pleasant to do, these are quite nice connectors. They're dead easy to do. You just basically line them up in that little guide, cut off the excess with some snips, place them in, and then crimp them shut. It actually works pretty nicely. So I do definitely rate these. These are quite nice. They're not much different to the ones that you punch down into really, but they are quite slick and they're a lot thinner, which is quite nice. So you could quite easily push those through a hole that you wouldn't be able to get the traditional IDC terminal ones through. So yeah, they're quite nice. So a bit of excess wire in there, but get all that cleared out. And then we can just put the trunking lid on and the end cap, and that'll also be ready. And then what I'll do is I'll go away off camera, test everything, and I'll come back and just, once it's all tested and fixed. If there's any interesting problems we find, I'll come and show them, but I'm not going to just show re-terminating every single one there's a dodgy connection on, because that would be a pain. But yep, time to go away and test everything, get the trunking cover back on, then we'll finally be ready to fit the patch panel, because currently it's 3 in the morning and I really want to get this done. Okay, so I've been out and I've tested all the runs, and most of them were fine. There's an issue with the stripper we were using where it was cutting through one of the cores on some of the wires, so we've ended up, we noticed that partway through and swapped to new strippers that weren't causing that, but it meant there was a few that we had to re-terminate that we found the problem with, but apart from that it's mostly been fine. The only issue I've had was this join here, and this was on the original cable that was once the phone line, which is Cat 5e, the others are all Cat 6. And when I first put it into this joiner here, it just wasn't working. It was just saying that one of the wires was disconnected. It was getting really annoying, and I kept retrying it. I blame the joiner. I spent so long re-terminating it multiple times. And eventually I kind of gave up and thought it might just be the joiner, because this Cat 5e is quite thinner, it's a lot thinner wire than the other stuff, and it wasn't sitting in this joiner as well. So I took it off and just put a keystone jack on it to test it, and found that it's still showing a broken orange conductor. So I think at this point it's actually a fault with this cable in the wall, because I've used my network tester here, and as you can see it says the fault is at 2.4 metres. This is a TDR test that measures the length of the cable, and it's saying that most of the pairs are 12 metres, which is about right, but the orange pair is 2.4 metres, which obviously is not right, and that is longer than the length of this cable going to the jack. So it's definitely not this cable, it's definitely not broken at this point, because that is saying 2.4 metres. And in fact I worked out that if I go into here and I disconnect the orange wire, which is the wire that says it's broken when you do the continuity test, if I pull that wire out there, which is fiddly there, if I pull that orange wire out and do the test again, it'll now say that the orange pair has 0 metres length. So that shows that the connection here to the orange was definitely correct, because disconnecting has made a difference. But with that connected, it shows it's still too short. So at this point, I basically have to conclude that this cable's damaged somewhere in the wall. It's possible that it's been, when this has been put in, it's been, someone's screwed or nailed into it or whatever. In fact, I do actually see a nail in the wall there, so I wonder if that's gone through that wire. So yeah, it's possible something like that. So it's not the end of the world. This is just the phone line to behind the couch. There is already another Cat 6 run to behind the couch, so there's already network there. It basically just means there's only one port there rather than 2. So we'll have to deal with that. So yeah, I'll just disconnect this cable here and just mark it as faulty. And then the cable we've already got going to this trunking, I'll just leave it in here and I'll just label what it does, and we'll leave the keystone jack on at the other end and maybe just not put it into the patch panel, just have it sit behind the patch panel, because this could be useful in the future. For example, it could be used to extend into the ONT, or it could be used for the alarm panel, which goes to Ethernet connection, and the alarm panel comes down as trunking, and yes, the professionals plugged it in. Yes, reasons. But we could actually use this to wire the alarm in or something, so there is use for it. So I'll leave the cable coil up here just in case it's required in the future, but yeah, I think this cable is just faulty, so yeah. And again, this tester has been super useful for pointing that out, because otherwise I'd have probably sat re-terminating that indefinitely, trying to get it to work, thinking it was definitely something I was doing wrong and not that the original cable was faulty. So yeah, let's get that taken out, tidied up, get trunking back on, and take a look at the full install. Okay, so that's it there. I've just cut all the connectors off and labelled that that one's a spare and that one's damaged. But yeah, so that's annoying, but it's fine. I mean, that could still be used for a phone line like it was being used for before, because there's only one wire that's broken. But yeah, there's no point in using it, so we're just going to leave that coiled up in there. So now we can get this trunking cover back on. Cool, so that's basically everything done. The only thing we need to actually swap over now is just this point in the bedroom here, just because the faceplate's cracked. And I want to swap out this module with one of the nice angled ones, just because I want them all to be consistent. And I want the proper labelling window, not this little recess that you meant to stick a label in. So pop this off and we'll swap it out. And this is what happens when you wire a network point like you're wiring a socket. With network, you don't strip back all the insulation and do this. Oh well. I mean, realistically, the best I can do is just fix it, just put it back in. I mean, there's not really anything else I can do. I'll just have to re-terminate it and just live with this mess. I mean, I could possibly put a bit of insulation off another bit Cat 6 over it, but because the inner separator has been cut back, it won't really make a difference. So I'll just re-terminate it as best I can and just, it'll do. I mean, it's in a bedroom, it's not used for much, and it is a very short run because the cupboard's directly below here, but yeah, that's just annoying, isn't it? Oh well, the joys of, stuff that's put together quickly with people that don't really specialise in data. There we go, re-terminated. Not the best, but I've just put a bit of spare sleeving or insulation over it just to try and protect it, but yeah, it's not the neatest, but it'll do. I mean, that will push down into the wall. It's the best I can really do with it without replacing the cable, because I can't pull any more up. So yeah, that's fine. So let's get a new faceplate on this to replace that cracked one, then we can screw it back, and then we'll be done. And there we go, that's a port now replaced. That looks a lot better. So now we're finally ready to get the cabinet sorted and get the patch panel installed. And there we go, that's the cover totally finished. So we've got trunking running along there, big cable coming out in that sort of braid through the brush plate. I've got that bit at the back there, all the cables are joined in. And I was a bit worried about that looking silly, but to be honest, that looks perfectly fine, I think. So yeah, that definitely works. So yeah, we've got all the cables down there. So what we now need to do is get everything taken out of the cabinet just to sort of tidy it all out, clean it all, and we'll get the patch panel in. And there we go, that's the patch panel installed. Apologies for the lights, we can't currently turn the lights on because they're smart bulbs and no network's down, but anyway. Yep, that's patch panel installed, so you see we've got all the modules up to port 14 and the rest are all blanked off, and these could be used for future expansion. And yeah, it looks all pretty neat in there. Obviously, if you look coming out the top, you can see the big sort of braided snake of cables all coming up and into the trunking, which is really nice. So the next thing we need to do is install the switches. We're going to put the switch in, the UDM, put a shelf in for the little flex mini switch as well, and then we'll put the server in here. And we can power everything up, and it'll all be working again. And there we go, that's all installed. So you can see at the top there we've got the little switch flex, little 8-port one, the patch panel, the 16-port PoE switch, which has most of the stuff on it, the UDM-Pro, and a little micro server there, and then the PDU is just installed in the back. So yeah, it's pretty neat. And this really goes to show the benefit of having that cable braid, because that cabinet is installed, or well, currently pulled right outside of the cupboard. So that means if someone ever needs to get into the cupboard to work on any of the stuff at the back, or someone needs to come in and work on the consumer unit, they can do that. The cabinet can be pulled out, even while it's powered on, slid slightly off to the side to go behind the TV, and it gives you full access to the cupboard. So that's pretty good, rather than having it fixed in and being permanently in there. So yeah, definitely happy with how that sort of worked. So now time to push this back into the cupboard and power it on and see if it all works. And there we go, that's the cabinet pushed back. So that's pushed back into the corner of the cupboard, leaves loads of space, printer can sit on top there neatly and there's space around it. Definitely very happy with how neat that is. So now let's power it all up for the first time and see if it all works. There we go. So yep, that's all the UniFi stuff starting up and the printer. So what we'll just need to do is wait for all that to boot up and hope it all works. And there we go, that's all now powered up. So we can see if you look in here, the switch, the UDM, server, everything's powered on and it's all working. So yeah, that's all fully installed and all fully functional. And I'm so happy with how this turned out with that trunking and the cable braid and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's all installed now. So the final thing is to do a quick tour of just everything that's installed, quick whip round, and then we'll wrap it up. So obviously here we've got the cabinet, and as you can see we've got the patch panel at the top there. Above that's a little 8-port switch, the UniFi US18 PoE switch, UDM-Pro, and the little HP micro server. So then there's a printer on top, and then that's all powered from the back. And then for all the cables, they come through this trunking here, drop down that braided sort of sleeve, and into the rack and go into the patch panel. And those flexible conduits, the one going vertical carries the joined cables that go to the stuff that was originally installed in the house, And the one going into the wall connects to TV ports. Speaking of the TV ports, we've got them down here now, all finished off. As you can see, we've labelled them all up with little numbers, so that's all numbered. And that connects all the stuff at the TV. Additionally, in the living room behind the couch, we've got this additional port here, which is one that was already there. We've just put a new jack on it. And we've just blanked off where that faulty port was, because I could have put the phone jack back, but it wasn't really required and the cable was faulty. So I've just blanked that off and we just left a single network point there. Obviously, I've numbered that as well. And then finally in the living room, we've got the access point up here, which obviously is not meant to be like that. We just lost the mounting plate, so my friend's ordered a new mounting plate for it, so that'll be mounted eventually. It's currently just stuck in a hole in the wall that obviously needs to be filled, along with that hole there. But that can all be filled, and once we get the mounting plate, that can just be screwed up there, so that's dead easy to do. But yeah, that's the access point there, and this is a UniFi 6 Lite, which is quite a nice little access point. So yeah, that's the downstairs access point. Upstairs in the landing, we can see we have the access point here, so that's just installed in the ceiling. Pretty neat. Through in the guest bedroom, we've got those two ports there that are now installed, and a little bit of wall that needs patched, but yep, that's there. And next time we've got time, we can put another socket in there to power the TV, but that port's there now, powering the TV and the Sky Q box as well, so the Sky Q box is now wired in, which is good. So now here we are in the office, and we've got the two ports installed in here next to that socket, so that'll serve everything in this room. And then here we are up in the attic, and as you can see, we've still got that cable route, but I've clipped off all the cable ties. And I'm really impressed with how that looks. It looks really, really neat. And all the grommets are still in place. It's a pretty neat setup. And then the other thing up in the attic that you wouldn't have seen before is these two network ports here. So there's just two network ports. They go down to the patch panel, and these could be used for some sort of radio equipment or whatever is going to be installed in the attic. So it's just nice to have these for the future, because I'm pretty sure you will need these. And for these, cables just run down the joist, clip along there neatly. They'll go under all the insulation, and as before, they just come up one of those grommeted holes, so that's all pretty neat. So yeah, the only thing left to do up here is get all this insulation back down. And there we go, that's all the attic insulation put back to normal, so all that's left spare is that insulation there, and then the network point is just up there on that joist there, so that's pretty neat up there. So there we go, that's all installed. And as I probably keep saying, I'm super happy with it. It is such a neat setup. And it was a really fun project to do, because it's the first time I've done a sort of full install in a freestanding house rather than a flat, where I've brought all the cables back to a single point. I did the video previously, but that was where we reused the run from downstairs to upstairs, so it wasn't quite the same. So this was really good fun to get it all installed, and I'm so happy with the end result. Obviously there's currently some big holes in the wall and an access point mounted like that, but once the access point's mounted properly and those holes are patched, this will be a super neat, slick setup. So yeah, so pleased with how this turned out. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. And obviously stay tuned for other sort of networking, smart home type videos. I can't also do full house installs that often, but it is great when I get to do them, and this has been such a fun video to make. So yeah, thank you very much for watching.